Greg Dyke is well known as the Director General of the BBC who took on Tony Blair over the Iraq War. Always a controversial figure, he has had a long career in print journalism and broadcasting, holding chief executive positions at London Weekend Television, Pearson Television and Channel 5. Forced to resign from the BBC in 2004 following the Hutton inquiry, his popularity as a leader was clearly demonstrated by staff taking to the streets in protest. Greg has also had a long-standing interest in football, with strong links to his boyhood club Brentford FC, and served on the board of Manchester United from 1997 to 1999. He's now trying to shake up another venerable UK institution in his current position as chairman of the Football Association.
Greg, what have been the pivotal events that have shaped your life?
Going to university in my mid-20s, going to the Harvard Business School, working at London Weekend Television as a sort of 30-year-old. They were the pivotal.
Going to university in your mid-20s?
Yeah.
As opposed to 18?
Well, I was hopeless at school. I'd failed at school. I left with 1 grade E A level.
In what?
In maths. And I met my maths teacher in a pub years later, and he said, "I still quote you, Dyke, as why not to give up at the mocks, because miracles can happen." So I was a failure at school. I didn't take it very seriously. I left to go and be a trainee manager at Marks and Spencer's, and I only understood about the thought process and thinking in the academic world by going back to university when I was 24.
And what happened between leaving school and going to university?
I was a trainee manager at Marks and Spencer's and got the sack after 3 months, which was the best thing that ever happened to me. Then I got a job in newspapers as a local newspaper journalist for 5 years, which was a great job at that age.
And what was the epiphany or the wake-up that you thought, I want to go to university?
I suppose I thought, if you wanted to be clever, you had to have gone to university. I discovered much later that that's not necessarily true. But the process of going, I learnt an awful lot.
Where did you go to university?
I went to university at York, where I'm now I've been the Chancellor for the last 10 years.
Oh, wow. And what did you study?
Initially social sciences and then politics.
So why was that a pivotal moment for you?
Oh, just because otherwise I'd have gone down the route of just being a pop journalist. And instead I learnt about thinking and about academic life and understanding and having a different approach to questions, which I wouldn't have had if I'd just been a pop journalist. I went and did some other things after I left university, and I ended up as a researcher at London Weekend Television that helped create TVAM, went to somewhere else, but in the end I ended up back at London Weekend Television, and I was the director of programmes, and they were going to make me the chief executive, and they thought I ought to know something about business, and they were right.
How long did you go to Harvard for?
I did one of those 3-month courses, you know. For me, what it taught me was trust what you are, trust in what you believe. I mean, there was a brilliant man lecturing there called John Cotter, who basically the first leadership person I mean, this is a long time ago now, first leadership person I'd come across, you know, who actually taught the difference between leadership and management. And for me, what I found him talking about was the stuff I did instinctively. And I thought, and it gave me the confidence then when I left to go back and to continue to do those things.
And then the final pivotal event was becoming CEO of London Weekend.
Well, no, it wasn't actually. It was probably in between, actually, because it was being a young researcher at London Weekend Television at a time when we looked at issues differently in the current affairs department. We looked at them
differently to today.
Well, differently today and differently to everybody else almost. We actually looked at them and said, it's not enough to say this is a problem. What if there's a solution? And that influenced the rest of my life.
What's the worst failure you've ever suffered? Failure or setback?
Oh, I was chief executive of London Weekend Television when Granada bought it in a hostile takeover bid. And that was pretty devastating. I mean, I made £7 million and was devastated because I couldn't stay. They asked me would I stay and run it, and I said, look, I'm sorry, but I think you're the enemy. I mean, if you've ever been in a hostile takeover, when anyone ever tried to take you up, they are the enemy. So I Partly, I had the choice of leaving because I made so much money. But I saw that as failure.
Failure because you'd fought so hard to remain independent and hadn't achieved that.
Yes, and we were better than they were. We were better management. We had better ideas. We ran the business better than they did, but they were bigger.
What's been the biggest breakthrough that you've had in your life?
The invention of Freeview changed the world of television. The idea of much more television for everybody, but you don't have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. That was your idea?
Yeah, we invented it in an office like this. And we did it with the intention of really stopping B-Sky B controlling digital television. And we did that. That was taking my approach to the world.
What is that approach?
Oh, fairly aggressive, fairly can-do. Don't listen to the politics. Is it a good idea? Do it. And if you're 80% there, that'll do. Because if you start analysing it again and again and again, you'll never do it. The problem with great ideas is that they get killed by boredom in the end.
I remember you saying when you got to the BBC that you were going to cut the crap.
Well, what I said to the staff, this is a great place, but imagine how good it could be if we could only cut all the crap, all the stuff, all the bureaucracy, all the stuff surrounds it.
As you've looked back on your career, and even the role that you're doing now at the FA, is there a theme of going into organisations and turning them round, or giving them a new purpose or a new vision or a new direction? Or
Well, I work on the basis that the first thing you've got to do is try and get the staff on your side, because you can't achieve much if you haven't got them on their side. But really you're saying, what is to be done? What are the good ideas? Let's do them. Let's just get on with. It's about speed. It's about how fast can you move? How quickly can you get things done? And the problem, particularly with non-profit and loss organisations, is there's no real pressure to change. So you've got to put that impetus into an organisation.
When you went to the FA, was there a problem that they were saying to you, look, we'd like you to come and help solve this problem, i.e. not enough young blood coming up through the English system? Or did you get there and see that was what the problem was, and then you had to go about finding a solution?
Oh, the latter. It's like the FA is like many organisations. It was quite happy for me to go in and be ceremonial and shake hands and all the rest of it and have a nice life. But that's not my view of the world. That's boring.
And would the BBC have been similar? That we've got a great organisation here, doesn't really need too much changing.
No, I don't think the BBC was there. I think the BBC, because my predecessor had never made real efforts to get on with the staff, and the staff didn't like him, they knew there was a cultural problem, which was one of the things I had to do. But there was also no doubt that I was brought in because I was seen as someone to fight Murdoch and B-Sky B. I left in a fairly bloody way, but that wasn't a battle within the BBC. That was a battle with government, where the governors of the BBC lost their bottle.
The Hutton inquiry, wasn't it?
And whether or not Tony Blair had sexed up the case for war. What's funny, 10 years on, is that everybody knows he sexed up the case for war, but at that time it wasn't quite as clear cut.
If you could rewind the film or video of your life back to age 20 and change one thing about yourself, what would that one thing be?
Well, I think I've had a blessed life, you see. I was a sort of working class kid who lived on the borders of Hayes in Southall and West London. And I ended up running the BBC, being chairman of the FA, chief executive of London Weekend Television, and a load of other interesting jobs. So I've had a blessed life. So I'm not sure I changed much. There are moments when I would have said, I should have been more circumspect. The trouble is, I'm not sure if you change that bit, whether you wouldn't have changed it all.
I was just wondering that. I was wondering if your personality being what it is what's helped you achieve lots of the things you've achieved. But like all things, a great strength can be a weakness as well.
And I'm sure that's right. The only advice I give kids today is don't be scared of it. Go for it. Do it. take chances, take risks. If you fail, well, you'll recover. You'll come back another way. But if you don't take the chance, if you don't take the opportunity when it's there, if you're nervous of it or scared of it, or you're scared of what happens if it goes wrong, you'll never do it.
Is that also how you felt, when you fought as hard as you did at the end of your time at the BBC about the Hutton Report?
I felt on the whole of Iraq that Tony Blair, and it was nothing to do with the politics of it, because it wasn't our job to decide whether or not you should go into Iraq. Our job was to reflect all sides of the argument. That was what we were trying to do. But of course, Mr. Blair was on a very suspect wicket and therefore wanted us to be on his side. Now, that's not new. That happens at every time of conflict over the years. Go back to Suez, go back to the Second World War, go back to the Falklands.
Yep.
Governments always want the BBC to be on their side. And our job, the job of the BBC, was not to be on their side. The job of the BBC was to report it as we saw it. So conflict is inevitable. It's just how much and when.
What was the feeling you had at the time? Was it justice needs to be seen, to be done, that I've got to stand up for something I can see going on that's wrong? What was...
No, I think we were standing up for the integrity of our reporters, really, the integrity of our journalists, and saying...
And the integrity of the BBC?
Yes, our job is to try to understand what is happening and explain it in as impartial a way as you can. That's the job, I think, of journalism. I mean, a lot of journalists today don't see that at all. I mean, they're just rabble-rousers. But that's the job of the BBC. The job is to understand and explain. Now, because of the power of the BBC, because of the influence of the BBC, it's inevitable that someone in the debate is going to think you're biased against them. Mm-hmm. And that was the position we reached with Tony Blair during the Iraq War, when he wrote to me on the day the war started and said, look, up to now I think your coverage has been biased. To which I wrote back and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Blair, but you cannot be the judge of impartiality. You are so far out there on one side of this. You can't possibly judge what's impartial and what's not. Neither can your people, including Alistair Campbell.
Do you feel you have to stand up for something always that you see being done wrong?
Yeah, I think I suppose I've always seen myself as an outsider in a system. I mean, I laugh now when I see myself described as part of the establishment, because I don't think I am. I've always seen myself as being an outsider who could say, look, I don't agree with this. This is wrong. And I always thought I had, luckily, the personality that I could take people with me in that process. Which wasn't always a great idea for them, by the way. Someone gave me a lot of money to write an autobiography, so I wrote it. And my wife came into my office one day and said, I've been thinking about you. Why do you never leave anywhere like anybody else? So I said, she said, well, why is it always a drama? And there's a bit of truth in that. If you're one of those people who always pushes, then sometimes it goes wrong.
And sometimes it goes very right, though.
Yeah. How will people see you in time? Well, it depends how many went right compared to how many went wrong.
Who's been your greatest teacher or mentor in your life?
My dad was a very quiet West London insurance salesman who did a job he did for 40 years and hated every day of it. But as a mentor, he taught us lots of things that really were important. And that is that he taught us everybody matters. My dad would go and have a chat with the road sweeper because he thought the road sweeper had dignity and was entitled to a relationship. So that was a big part of my life. And he laughed at pompous people. He thought it was funny. So we never took any notice about, this person's important. He always thought that was funny. Later, when I was at London Weekend Television as chief executive, my chairman was a guy called Christopher Bland, who then went on to chairman of the BBC and chairman of BT. He was quite an important figure in my life. I mean, we were totally different. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was an upmarket toff and he thought I was a downmarket oik. But we both had the same view of life, really.
What did you learn from him? What was his gift to you? of your relationship with him?
Well, what I learned about him was that the relationship between a chairman and chief executive is the most important relationship in an organisation. He looked all gruff at times and difficult, and he wasn't at all. I also learned that the first time he shouts at you, you shout back. But we became close friends. And if you go through a hostile takeover bid together and you lose together, there's a bond that is there. I mean, another time in my life, I took over TVAM when it was dying, and we turned it around. If you've been in crisis together with people, there's a bond that is unbreakable. It goes on for the rest of your life.
Who inspires you now, today?
If someone had done in the world of business what Alex Ferguson did in the world of football, we'd have sat here today canonising them. We'd have said it's astonishing. How do you do it? How do you keep going that many times? I mean, I've always thought that the average length of a chief executive sales 5-7 years, and after that you need to change because someone else, you need new ideas. And after a while you've got to change the ideas that you put in, and you can't do it. You're not very good at that because they were your ideas. And therefore you have to change the chief executive. Now, Alex Ferguson did that all that time, for all those times.
I read 50% of the Premier League sides have changed their manager during the course of the season.
The average, if you take out Arsene Wenger, right, so they take the other 19, the average manager lasts 360-something days. Pretty damning. You can see why they all feel slightly insecure.
If the FTSE 100 was run like that, it would be a very different...
Well, is the FTSE 100 much better? It's not 365 days, but it's 3 to 4 years.
I think it's dropped under 3 years.
Yeah,
but
dropped under 3 years. But at least it gives you time to do something.
What's your definition of success?
My criteria was never money. I happen to have made quite a lot of money, but that was irrelevant. That wasn't what I was after. My criteria was, did I enjoy it? Did I get good jobs where you could get things done, where you could have ideas? Did you inspire some people? Did they follow you when you needed to be followed? Did they support you when you needed it? Did you live through the rough times? And did you come out the other side? And I can think 3 or 4 times which were pretty rough, and you say, yeah, but I came out the other end.
That's success.
And it is success, yeah. The experience at the BBC, where, on the day I left, the staff walked out and all took to the streets and protested, which was great because it gave you, at least on a terrible day, it gave you something that at least someone appreciated what you'd done.
I was going to ask you about that. To what extent does success also involve other people?
Oh, it must involve other people.
So it's not just coming up with the idea.
Someone asked me once when I was at the BBC, what would success here mean for you? And I said, well, one of the things it would mean is that I left this a happier place than I found it. Did the people who worked for you think it was a rewarding experience? That seems to me one of the things about success. I mean, in profit and loss companies, you can be successful by making a load of money and having a deeply unhappy organisation. Now, I think that long-term that can't work.
And isn't long-term success.
And isn't long-term success.
How does attitude determine altitude?
Well, I think attitude is about your view of the world. And my view of the world is incredibly optimistic. I always think everything's going to be fine. Never crosses my mind that everything's going to fail. So I'm always quite surprised when it does. So when I got chucked out of the BBC, or when we didn't see off Grenada when I was running London Weekend, it came as a shock, a real shock, and quite traumatic to me. Because I'm one of those people who thinks if the logic's right, we should go that way and we'll be right. And most of the time you are. I did a solo performance at the Albert Hall once, singing Great Balls of Fire for a charity concert. Somebody asked me to do it because I do it at family gatherings. My son's band turned up and I always sing Great Balls of Fire, and someone asked me to do it at the Albert Hall. And you thought, you can't turn that down, can you? I mean, I think it was pretty terrible, mind you.
But you gave it a go.
Always give it a go. Or if you get the opportunity, take it, try it, do it.
When you were in your teens or your 20s, Did you ever have kind of a destination or an altitude in mind, you know, a vision for where you wanted to end up, or have you done it as you've gone along, or made it
Oh
up?
no, if anyone told me when I was 17 or 18 that I was going to end up
Doing the
running the BBC, running London Weekend Television, chairman, I wouldn't have believed it.
My impression in reading about your career is, in terms of attitude determines altitude, is actually one of the real gifts of your leadership of any organisation you've been involved with. You tried to change the attitude and therefore the altitude of the whole organisation. Certainly when you went into BBC, you were saying earlier, you know, it's like, okay, you're good, but is good enough? We could be an awful lot better. There seems to be a theme from the leadership campaigns you've had.
Yeah, what you're trying to do is give people confidence. One of the things, I mean, we introduced the biggest leadership training program in this country when I was at the BBC. And I always remember I used to turn up and lecture them. And I always used to say, be you. Don't be anything else. Be you. And the number of people who came up to me afterwards and said, nobody's ever given me permission to be me. You know, I mean, how often do you see people go into leadership jobs, and the moment they get the job, they change. They start abandoning what they were because they start aping the behaviour of what they think is a leader. Mm-hmm. Just be them. Just be them.
Have you ever thought about what your life's purpose is?
I don't think my life had a purpose. I think we're born and die. And if, when we've gone, somebody remembers something you did, that's quite good. You know, something positive. I wouldn't want to be remembered for something negative. But I think that's as good as it gets. I don't believe in this idea that I mean, some people achieve incredible things. You know, if you invent the big cure for cancer, then you should be remembered. I'm not sure some of the people we remember today are worth remembering.
But I think, you know, your purpose is about being a good husband, it's about being a good dad. Yeah. Being a good boss.
Yeah, I look back on my dad and say, he was a good man. He brought us, you know, brought my brothers and I up to believe in a set of things. And that's important. And I think my kids, we've done the same with my kids.
What are you grateful for?
Oh, I'm grateful for good health. I think it all changes if your health starts, if you get it. And I've been over. I came. My brother, who's not had such good health as I came from the other side of the family. I mean, but then he's a bit of a hypochondriac. My grandmother lived to 101. She was a strong old bird. I mean, you know, and my mother's 99 and still going. And I come from that strain. And I think if you have good health and a life without tragedy, really.
What else are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for the chances. I'm grateful for the luck, actually.
That's my next question.
Is it?
Do you believe in luck?
Oh, I believe totally in luck.
Do you?
Yeah. Not solely, and you make your own luck by making your own opportunities. But yeah, you look down and you think if he hadn't gone that way at that time on that, I wouldn't have been able to do that job which changed my life. So yes, you've got to be lucky. When I was at London Weekend Television, my chief executive, I was director of programmes, was a guy called Brian Tesler. And he said to me one day, I'll invest in anything you do. So I said, why? He said, well, it's not because of your talent. He said, I just think you're the luckiest person I've ever met. I mean, I literally buy raffle tickets and I'm quite surprised when I don't win. I'm one of those people. I always think I'm going to win.
When do you feel in the zone?
I'm at my best when you're playing with a good idea. Someone comes and says, what about this? And you say, that's a good one, isn't it? What can we do with that? How do we do that? Can we do it that way? Do we do that? One of the dangers of becoming the boss is that actually people instead of them saying to you, that's a crap idea, they go and do it because you're the boss. So you've got to have people around you who say, that's a terrible idea. And you all laugh and you get on. But that's my best, is sitting with a bunch of people throwing good ideas, throwing ideas around.
Your idea or theirs?
Oh yes, doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be mine. Oh, no. The best idea I've heard at since I've been at the Football Association came from someone who came with this idea for what you do with local authorities and and more local football pitches. Really clever idea. I thought that's a good one. It's a good one. There aren't enough of those at the FA, by the way, but that's a good idea.
Do you think in companies and boardrooms, that good idea, kicking the ball around, is encouraged or not?
In companies it is. In organisations, some it depends on the leaders. Boardrooms, not a lot. I don't think many good ideas come out of boardrooms. That's not what they're there for. But I think in organisations, yeah, I mean, a well-run with a good chief executive, that's the job. The job is to, here's a problem, what do we do with it? I mean, why I've grown deeply frustrated with politics in my life is nobody in their right mind says, here's a problem, now let's abuse each other to see if we can solve it. Yeah, that's what they do in politics. What they should do is sit around and say, that's difficult, isn't it? What do we do about that? Anyone got an idea? How do we solve that? Whereas in politics, they've all got preconceived ideas anyway, and they start trying to kill each other, or to gain a very small political advantage. I think we live in a world where too many politicians, I sound like Nigel Farage, but too many politicians left university, went into politics and never done anything else, and therefore they don't bring anything else to it. But also, I think the nature of party politics means that you've got to be right. I know, I'm right. Well, hang on, we're not all right. Up at York University, we've got an Institute of Effective Education, which looks at what works. Because if you look at the world of education, we're all so hidebound by our own prejudices. Well, take that aside, what works? If we want more kids to learn maths at a young age, what works? And it seems to me that's what the world of politics doesn't do.
What are 3 values that are very important to you?
Care about the people who work for you, but also treat them properly, treat people properly. I mean, nobody ever got better out of somebody by making them feel afraid. They got better out of somebody by making them feel valued. So make people feel cared for, make them feel valued, particularly if in a working relationship.
So respect for people.
A bit more than that.
More than respect.
A bit more
caring.
than that. Caring. Look at the world as a positive place, not a negative place. Be half full, not half empty. What I learnt from my dad, just because you've done all right in the world, don't ever think you're better than everybody else. Because you're not. And you see people do it so often, oh, I'm very important, don't I matter, and the rest of us. And then they retire or they get the push or something and they're not anymore. And you never are. So just, don't think you're better than anybody else just because you got a better job or you've been luckier in life. I like most people, you see. I start from the basis of saying I like most, particularly I like ordinary people. I can't say I like everybody I meet in my life, but I do like people who do ordinary jobs and ordinary lives. I think that was a massive asset to me in the different careers I've had. It's not only that I go in to talk to the security guy because I think it's in my interest. I go and talk to him because I quite like him, and I think he quite likes me. We can talk about all sorts of things. So that bit, my dad, who taught us all, don't be pompous. All people have value. I think has stuck with me all my life.
What's going to be your legacy?
You can know what you hope it would be.
Okay, what would you like it to be?
Well, I'd like it to be that people thought I looked after my kids, I was a decent husband, I had the people who worked for me had a rewarding experience, and I changed a few things. I do think changing things is important. Actually, I'm on this committee now that puts blue plaques up. I haven't been to a meeting yet, but I thought they asked me to do it, and I thought, oh, that'd be fun, because I could do some renegade blue plaques, couldn't I, for people that you wouldn't normally get them.
Oh, you mean the blue plaques on people's
doors, outside their doors.
So and so lived here.
Yeah, it's quite interesting about who do you think really mattered, and therefore is entitled to the legacy of a blue plaque.
So you're going to have a blue plaque on your house?
Oh, I doubt it. I doubt it.
That's wonderful, Greg. Thank you very, very much indeed.